All right, well, I guess we should start. The others will catch up. So nice to meet you, everyone. Today we're here to talk about the future of work. This webinar is sponsored by Platform.sh. Of course, we have a few people right here. So first is we have Christian Nussbaumer, is our customer success manager at Platform.sh. The second is Yahya, is the Chief Marketing Officer of Micento. We're delighted to start this conversation with you today. And as you can see, maybe to give you a little bit of context about us as a company, we've been existing for 10 years. First 5 years as a product inside another company. Then we got to successful, these things happen. We became a spin-off, and now 5 years later, we're 253. Maybe by next year, we could probably be around 300, 320. So we're growing quite fast. And we've always been working remotely, which means that our platformers are used to that. I've been used to that for 10 years now. As you can see, we have 33 countries. We're amongst almost 200 different cities, and we're very spread out because we have like 40 different nationalities. On my end, I'm our diversity and inclusion manager, which means I'm in charge of making sure the company stays diverse and everyone has a nice onboarding experience. And I'm also in charge of all that is tied to talent acquisition, which means that I'm recruiting basically all over the world. And a few things, of course, can be challenging. You have to do this the proper way, right? And so today we'll be talking about the few things, because this, when you're working remotely, it's full of challenges and opportunities. Some can be organizational, some can be operational. You have also the cultural side to take into account, and of course the human side. We'll go over by the end over all the key takeaways that you should definitely remember coming out of this session, and we'll also have a Q&A session. In the meantime, whenever you feel like we should deep dive on the subject, or you have an experience or a remark you would like to share, feel free to do so in the chat. I will address them in due time. And of course, I'm excited to share all of that with you together. So I guess we can probably start right away. Let's start for now about the new normal. I'll let either Christian or Yahya start talking about it.
Yes, so the new normal is a bit of a phrase we've heard a lot since the Corona pandemic started May of, or even before May of last year. What we've seen as well is a new normal in terms of how companies are shifting their workspace. Many companies will actually continue to allow their staff to stay remote even after the pandemic is over. Some examples include Facebook, for example, which has a huge headquarter in Silicon Valley, as well as Microsoft, which is, I believe, headquartered in Seattle. But even though these companies have immense headquarters with many thousand people working there, they're actually considering, at least for a part of their people, to stay fully remote even after COVID is over. So maybe we could talk about remote work actually being something as part of the new normal as well, where more people have the opportunity to stay remote. And there are other companies as well, like Google, like Twitter, like MasterCard, Siemens, like even very old companies like Siemens that are now considering staff to be fully remote and to be that on a continuous basis, where if you would have asked them 2 years ago, they would have said, no, we're not going to do that. So that's quite an interesting development, I think.
Well, okay. What's also interesting is that I may add here is also we're saying the new normal, but it's not that new, to be honest. So the first time when we were talking about remote work was in the 70s. Just imagine. So it's been like over 40 years, and now we're saying it's something new, but it's not. So I mean, even in the 70s, there were programs with IBM where they were testing how it works, telecommuting, for example. So it's something that we already had, and now it's becoming something. I wouldn't say normal, but it's going to become something kind of obligating for companies to do so.
Okay. One thing I would like to add also, it's for all of our attendees, you should know that you will all receive a recording and the deck by the end of the webinar. I do think that what you both said was very interesting. I guess for us, we've always been used to that, and some of our workers have already been more than 10 years working remotely. But a lot of companies seems to have trouble adjusting. You know, some managers, they want, of course, to see the people because they're not used to that, because you need to change your style and stuff. Um, I guess my point is I'd like to see if out of all the challenges that remote work, you know, has been pushing forward to these companies, um, if you can have, you know, some kind of opportunities that come out of it. Because for us, right, it's normal, but for the others, it's not. And maybe you have some insight regarding that, either Christian or Yahya.
Yes, I mean, if you have a traditional company that has always been office-based, and suddenly you have to send your people home because there's a pandemic. There's like a transition that you go through. There is things that you have to figure out, like how do we communicate best, how can we collaborate best. It's not that you can just walk up to a colleague who's maybe on the side of your office space and have a communication, like have a talk with him. Like these things are, they can be quite challenging in the beginning, but our own company having over 250 people fully remote, as well as other companies which have over 1,000 people fully remote, also show that it can be accomplished. And we are talking about companies that have been remote all the time. But if you go into like this kind of transition, yes, there are some things that you need to figure out. But it's also an opportunity at the same time. Our CEO here has said, if you can read that quote, the health crisis is as well an opportunity for a positive change, because remote, we believe, is more resilient, more eco-friendly. So you don't have your employees travel maybe sometimes hours every day to go to the office and back. And it also enables you to be more diverse. So there's a new opportunity suddenly that you have, like if you don't need people to be physically located in the city that you are, maybe you can hire someone from the other end of the world to work for you. Maybe you can hire someone from another country. So that's also an opportunity that you will get by being remote.
Generally, also, I would like also to add here when you talk about remote working, and it's remote working is a kind of success factor. So if you look at we've seen in the slides of the beginning, we've seen the likes of Microsoft or Google, some kind of things. So if you remember how did they start? So how have they been before becoming multi-billion companies? They were working remotely, to be honest. So they were working in their garage, they were working at home. So being in the office didn't make them successful. So they were successful working like very flexibly. So it's for me, it's also a way of telling company leaders, hey, you can be optimistic that it works well. Because if we just take the examples of the most successful companies nowadays, well, we can conclude that remote working is not that wrong or that difficult, maybe. It's just a question of do you want it, and are you convinced to do it?
Agreed. Now, let's say that if we focus on the organizational side of it, like what would you like to say to us?
Yes, I think something that you need to figure out is how can you hire someone from anywhere? Anywhere meaning that maybe you will have your next person coming from Lisbon, or maybe from Paris, or maybe from Dublin. So what do you have to do as a company in order to be able to hire someone? There are some countries where you can be a freelancer and then just invoice a company and work for them. That's what I currently do with Platform.sh. I'm living in Spain. We have our headquarters in Europe in Paris. So I basically invoice the company and they pay me kind of my monthly salary. So, but there are countries like Switzerland and Germany where that's not possible, where you cannot be a freelancer and only work for one company or self-employed. So in these countries, for example, there could be other alternatives, like you could maybe add a subsidiary of your own country. If you have enough people in one country, maybe open an office there, or not an office actually, but maybe just like a company structure. But there's also an alternative called an employer of record, where basically you give a deco, for example, the right to hire people in that specific country, and then a deco pays your employee and you pay a deco. There's another provider called remote.com, which came up as well, and they have already over 20 different countries where you can hire someone directly. Of course, it comes with a bit of an additional cost in terms of you having to pay a premium on top of the salary, but a flexible structure like this would allow you as well to hire almost anyone from almost anywhere. What probably should be done as well is, like, how can you decouple your company from your physical location? So what kind of tools do you need in order for your employees to work together from any place in the world? maybe some kind of collaboration software, or maybe you should invest in cloud-based solutions. Maybe you should also think about becoming hardware independent, where you can have employees working on a Linux laptop, on a Mac OS, or maybe even on a Windows laptop. So how can you accommodate this from an organizational point of view? And also, what are your policies in terms of how do people communicate? How do you hire people remotely? How do you onboard a new employee remotely? So kind of, in a way, how can you be ready in order to take anyone on from any location in the world? Just to give you an example, I've been hired by Platform.sh, not having met one of my colleagues in the last 1.5 years almost, and I still work for this company full time every day. So it is possible to do that, but it also comes with a number of things that need to be put in place. And last but not least, I think what's important as well is your operations team, the people taking care of HR and other things, they should be able to support that transition. So maybe you have to boost your HR a bit in order for that to work. Another example for fully remote companies is that they usually have something like a yearly get-together where the whole company goes to, say, to a specific location for a week. So every employee is there. I've had it in my old employer. We have it as well in Platform.sh. We didn't have it because of Corona last year, but we're looking forward to doing it again. And that's something that needs organizing too. That's a complicated task, getting several people, maybe even several hundred people into one single location for a week. So that requires a lot of planning, a lot of work as well. So you probably need to boost your operations team a bit in order to support that.
Agreed. It's true that you can even add either an events planner, for example, or a manager. But yeah, there are ways to do that, and it's more parent friendly because they don't have to commute every day. So the trade-off is just 1 week of being together. I think we can make it work. Yeah. Do you have some remarks regarding those challenges, or maybe some insight regarding your personal experience?
I would like to add that you already mentioned about commuting, so it means to go from home to work. There's a very nice saying from one of the most famous futurists of the 20th century. So he was on very early. I think his quote is from the 90s or something. He basically said that I mean our most unproductive or let's say the most unproductive things about our time is moving millions of people to work areas every morning, then back home every evening. So it's totally not. I mean, it's first of all not environment friendly. It's not good for quality of life, of course. And what is also surprising when we talk about the organizational challenges here, Christian mentioned that we need the right tools to have. So we have been having the right tools and we have been developing them over the years. So technology somehow was pushing us towards working flexibly and everywhere. But we as or let's say many company leaders were just refusing it. So they were somehow pushing the people to develop these technologies, but they were somehow not ready, I think, to use it in the way that they can be used to benefit everybody.
Okay, thank you for that. Now let's talk about the organizational opportunities this time, Christian.
Yes, I mean, if you have a truly independent, location-independent company, you can hire the best people, no matter where they live currently. It might turn out that your next superstar engineer maybe lives in Lisbon, maybe he comes from the Ukraine or she, or maybe they live in France, you don't know. So even like when for my old company, we were located in Malta, which is a very small island of 450,000 people. There is not a big enough space to hire the right people if your whole region has 450,000 in it. So what the company did from day one was being fully remote, even though the founders lived no more than 4 kilometers away from each other. From day one, they decided to work fully remote. And this basically enables you to become more diverse and more flexible. And yes, you can get the best people no matter where they live. And also you are much more flexible if you're location independent. No matter what comes your way, you can probably tackle it. For example, there could be a natural disaster. Maybe we have something of like, I don't know, maybe some communication lines are cut and suddenly people can't use the internet anymore in a certain place, or maybe there's like 2 meters of snow and people can't get to the office anymore. Well, if people are already working from home, that's not really a problem. And whatever happens in one region or in one place doesn't affect the other places where people might be coming from. Like Platform.sh having 250 people in 40 countries or something like that. That's a huge benefit to us from a risk management perspective as well. And if you don't have a commute of 1 to 2 to sometimes 3 hours every day, you'll be much happier and much healthier as an employee. You will have much stress in your life. You will feel better because you don't have to go 1.5 hours in the morning to work while it's still dark in winter, then work all day, and then again in the evening when it's dark again, go back 1.5 hours. So maybe you come back at 7, 8 p.m. in the evening, and basically what do you do then afterwards if it's already cold and if there's no light outside, right? So this also can boost your production. People working from home usually are more productive, and there are a number of surveys that actually show that. So happier employees also probably means more productive employees. So these are the kind of opportunities I think you have from an organizational perspective as well.
Thanks. It's true that from my point of view as a people manager, usually employees always thank us because of that opportunity, to have more time to be with their families, their kids, engage in personal activities such as going to the gym, gaming, better themselves, just going out overall. And I think it's very important to remember that not only does it boost productivity, but at the same time, people are just way more committed because they'll have a healthier work-life balance. So I do like that. Now, let's talk about everything that's tied to the operational side of things. Yahya, how about you? What would you like to tell us?
When we just talk about the organizational challenges, but obviously there are also operational challenges that we have, especially everything relating to what is happening internally in the company. So, I think everybody somehow grew up knowing at some point you finish your studies and then you go to office. So, it also means that there's a whole culture that has to change. It's also a question of changing the mindset we have. So companies have to rethink the way they organize themselves, so the way they also lead their team. So it becomes more a question about not investing in having the best chairs or the best desks, but it's more like about making sure that you have very good at performing tools. So we mentioned here some examples like G Suite or Slack or something. So anything that would help people to communicate and also to feel like they work together. And but at the same time, it's also important that since we say remote work is also about being flexible, we should also be flexible to allow our employees to use the system they prefer. I come from I've seen companies where you're just obliged to use a certain kind of system or computer. So if you're a designer, for example, and then you're used to use Apple products, then suddenly you have to change to using Windows. Obviously, it's a bit for employees. It's not ideal. It becomes more difficult, and of course, then we also have to be innovative when it comes to the kind of software you're using. So we just mentioned some Slack is just one example we mentioned, but it's also important that we don't stick to something that we've been using the last 30 years maybe. So today nobody wants to use Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Office is not maybe the ideal solution because with Microsoft Office, you all know it's a bit difficult to collaborate. So maybe using G Suite is better. So doing presentations together, and maybe someone is working from California with someone in Paris. So this is also a question of the way you choose your software. But it's also a question of going remote full in, so all in. So it depends. How do you want to work remotely? It doesn't make sense, of course, if you just say, okay, let's just allow some few employees to work remotely and everybody has to come to the office. Obviously, it won't work well because those who are working remotely, for them, it's a bit complicated because maybe they're just 3 or 4 people using a certain kind of software that allows them to communicate. But then the others in the office have no clue about those kind of softwares. So and it also depends it depends on leaders as well. So if a leader, for example, changes every day depending on his mood or what kind of solution or what kind of remote solution he wants to use, maybe then Christian is on Google Meets, and then our leader is on Zoom, and I myself sitting around on another solution, and then we have another one who likes writing emails. So of course it's hard to communicate well, and what I consider also very important, I think Pierre, I know you would also agree with me when it comes to inclusion, or to include all employees equally. So it's important that there's not a difference between those who are coming to the office and those who are working remotely, because I myself experienced also throughout my career. So everybody who's not at the office is not working. So it's like, yeah, okay, you're working from home. It's like you're chilling at home or something. But we should be aware, and we should also accept the fact that everybody who's working for the company with all commitment, that person is doing because that person has a passion for the company also. So everybody is contributing to the goal of the company. So it's crucial that everybody feels like belonging to the company, no matter where you work. It doesn't depend if you're in the office, if you are working from home. Best example is we all know what happens when we arrive at the office. So I myself arrive at the office uh, after 2 hours of commuting, and I arrive. The first thing I do is making a coffee and speaking with my colleagues, maybe, and then getting a call. Then maybe it takes me like 2 hours until I really can start working. And at the same time, you get a colleague who has got questions. So productivity can be very low in the office, but still many people still believe, okay, when you're in the office, so you must be working, you must be doing seriously. But I think Christian can agrees also with me. When you work at home, when you work on your own, so you're really fully responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your motivation, and so whatever you do, you're doing because you feel that you have to do it. So there's no obligation, but you do it because you want to do it for the company. And I really hope and wish that the company leaders would also appreciate the fact.
Yeah, I agreed. It's true that if you were talking pure productivity, since at home you can do some deep work, it's actually easier to concentrate. And since we're on the record, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm always focused whether I'm at work or not, but no, it's okay. Thank you for that. It's true that, you need modern tools. You need to be able to have trust. You need to be able to recognize that people can be focused at home. I think it's very important to move forward regarding that. Now, if we're talking about opportunities, because these were the challenges, but of course, a lot of things on their personal side also can change thanks to that. So, what do you want to tell us about it?
So when we see of course many opportunities. I mean, with a remote work, you you somehow become obliged to do something when it comes to your IT. Because at some point you will realize that the IT or the classic IT you have, where servers are maybe stored like somewhere in your office. So those times are like they simply are over. So it's not so today things are more different, of course. So the IT also has to make a certain kind of effort. So and if someone works remotely, of course, ideally that person has a laptop. So the easy example is Christians sitting there at the beach, and then we're working very well, and then so suddenly something happens with the laptop. So changing a laptop is way easier than changing a whole docking station, for example. And it also becomes more important that we invest in software rather than in just hardware solutions. I myself don't need like that the highest performing computer that has I don't know how many gigabit or how many gig or how many speed and that kind of stuff. I just need something that allows me to work well. So I need the basics for me. That's fine. And for me, it's important that I can also work from everywhere, so that I'm obliged to be at some kind of place. And I mean, everything starts also with the IT. It's also a question of investments. Usually, we invest a lot in IT. So when it comes to IT, the whole budget goes in. Even I've experienced where I've experienced a moment where my marketing budget was taken, like for example, to invest in IT, pretending we're investing in something that you would need in marketing. I said, well, I don't need kind of thing. And as I said earlier, so Microsoft Office is probably not the ideal solution. So why always sticking to something that we've been using for 10 years, or because others are using it? And generally, we see also that when you go remote, it's a cost-saving experience, especially in Switzerland. In Zurich, we have like extremely high prices when it comes to renting an office. And when you're a young company or a startup, let's say, so the whole country becomes not interesting for you, even though Switzerland has like a huge advantages. You have the big universities here. You have a pool of very highly skilled people that can work for you. But if you have to spend more on your office than on your employee, then something's totally wrong, of course. And the remote working would be is definitely then the very solution that has to be taken into consideration.
It's very interesting because it's true that what would you invest more into, like your employees, because once they have a new skill set, no one can take it away from them, or in offices that do some it could be anything, turmoil, rates that change, capricious landlord, anything can happen. So that's a very good point. Christian, maybe you want to add something about all of what Yahya talked about?
I think he summarized it well. And I can give you an example, for example, where I had to use a software called RDP, remote desktop connection, to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have my laptop somewhere. I was actually in South America back then. And then I would connect myself to a workstation in Switzerland, and it came with a 5-6 second lag of my mouse. So every time I moved the mouse, I had a lag in there. Maybe not 5-6, but at least 2 or 3 seconds. And it made working really, really difficult. So this is a tool it's been around since probably the end of the 90s, maybe the year 2000, or even a bit before that. And it's probably not the right tool you want to use today anymore. We're in 2021 now, if I'm not mistaken. So there are different tools that you can use. And I can literally take my laptop today, I can throw it into the water, I can pick up another one tomorrow, and within 5 minutes, I can start working again, because there's nothing local on my laptop. We use cloud tools for the majority of what we do at Platform.sh. And apart from a few maybe files I download in my download folder, everything else is online. So I don't have to be afraid either to lose my hardware. And this gives me also the kind of flexibility as when something like an accident happens, maybe I spill something over my laptop, maybe some water, and then it doesn't work anymore. I can just pick up another one and continue working. And I think that's really what maximizing the conditions for efficiency is all about. You should put the emphasis on communication. And once you figure out communication, the rest comes quite easily.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Which brings us now to the cultural side of things, which would be more, of course, on my end. Here's my experience so far. So whenever you're working in a company where people are spread out just as ours, the thing is, it's better if the whole company is remote, right? For example, if some of the people are working from offices and some are not, and they have some communication issues, then people can feel lonely or not part of a team, and it's something that you absolutely want to avoid. My advice is to make sure your teams are properly trained to actually be better at communicating because of remote work. Once you're good with that, thanks to the tools that Yaya were mentioning, or the rest that Christian talked about, then you're good to go. But it's very important to make sure that there's no difference, no second-class citizen. This way, everyone feels like they belong. And which ties into my next point, like hiring the right people is actually really hard. As you might have known, depending on your own company, 1 or 2 jobs are always way more difficult. And so by changing your mindset, headhunting or contacting people or accepting applicants and recommendations from all over the world, you would be able to look for outliers. You would be focusing more on personalities, like soft skills, character attributes, cultural fit, whether for innovation or whether to get along. Of course, solution 1 is better, because by then you will make sure that these people are actually open and curious and diverse enough to create something meaningful. Because what's going to happen is, if people are not living at the same place, of course, they will be very different. But why should you refrain yourself from finding the best colleague you can have if that person lives in South Africa, if the number 2 is in Canada, and the number 3 is in Japan? If they're speaking the right language, have the right skill set, the right curiosity towards you, or already a fan, why shouldn't you be hiring them, right? So skills can be trained, but the right character cannot be trained at all. It's either something you have or a capacity or potential, but if it's there, it's there. So if we're talking now from a strategic point of view on how to attract the best talents, of course, obviously, you got the big ones out there, Facebook and all the other ones, and the leaders of every, of course, specialty in tech nowadays. And it's very hard to compete, right? They'll come at you with benefits, they'll come at you with bigger salaries. Some of them will even say, heck, I'm going to pay 20% more than anyone. But at the end of the day, this doesn't matter. If you do surveys, you'll realize that people are looking for flexibility, ownership, nice colleagues, intellectual challenges, and so on and so forth. So if you live by clear, real values, something that has not been made by the communication agency, or something that the salary and employees agree, like they have the same mindset that the CEO, and there's no discrepancy, then you have a win, especially if it's little things but are actionable. Like, for example, you say flexibility, which means that people can actually set their own hours in the calendar as long as they meet the deadlines every week with the teammates and the manager, and they have their weekly, then I guess everything's fine, you know. So if you're doing it like that and create a company people want to work for, as in employee oriented or customer oriented, something that you can be proud of for real, and they tell you it's the case, then you'll get more recommendation. It will be way easier to hire. And you know, you always got to trust your gut feeling. If you have kids, for example, and you can explain to your kid proudly what you've been doing, you're probably doing something well. So, of course, we can add to that the fair policies. Christians earlier mentioned them. If you have something that's fair and advantageous to most people, especially, for example, to dads or juniors or people who are about to retire, people will remember that and will be talking about it because these things are real. They're way better than just communication. So people will flock to you and be attracted to you if you live by your values and put them forward. So this is my best recommendation. Now, if we're talking about opportunities from the cultural side of things, it's a little different, of course. As we were saying, so we talked about the values and the rest and having access to a wider talent pool. Um, there are different things, right? The seniors, the women, the all types of nationalities. You have to be really open-minded, and if you are, you will struggle less with retaining your employees, because if you invest in them as in training, like Yahya was saying, instead of real estate, if you make sure you devote time to them, but you show them you're willing to make them grow, right? Something is going to happen, and it's not that expensive as compared to losing 6 months and then starting the whole recruitment process again. Otherwise, you'll be looking at something along 30 to 50K that are lost. I mean, it's a shame from a business point of view, since it was made on your margin. A bigger radius also of hiring means that you will have a higher chances of finding the right people, because there's something that maybe you hadn't thought about. For example, in the eastern countries of Europe, for some reason, at some point after 8 years, more than half the women are dropping out and to change careers. Why is that? If you find the answer and you discover that they want to stay, then you will get great results. So it's worth, diving into it. Um, so I guess at the end of the day, my recommendation is always remember that people who are engaged intellectually, have open colleagues, will be willing to stay and will actually bring you more people like that. So you wouldn't even have to work on the retention because the atmosphere is great. So if you are building something really diverse in terms of origin, of education, of experience, when I say education, it's, for example, Ivy League against university. Why not have both? University profiles are used to R&D, which is interesting when you want to innovate. So try to have a different mindset and different culture, because the more diverse your team is, the stronger your company will become, because you will come up with more creative solution. It will appeal to a broader audience, which means more business. And thanks to more business, you can invest in employees and R&D more. And then little by little, you'll get there. So it's something to remember. So thanks for listening to me regarding that. I guess we can move on to the next part. Unless, of course, you have questions, remember to ask them in the chat. Let's focus now on the human side of things, because this is, at the end of the day, a company is always made of people. So yeah, I'll let you tell us your experience.
As you already said, companies are made of people, and people are human. So we don't recruit robots. We don't recruit anything that is not human. So everybody who's working in the company, they are human. So we should also not forget that. So when it comes to the recruiting parts of people, when they start working, of course they need to somehow get used to the company, get used to their tasks. So it's very important, especially when we're remote working. It's extremely important that we highlight the aspect of communication. So it's all about communication. I mean, it's something very interesting what we tend to say when we work. I remember some managers I used to have in the past. So they would say when you work remotely, so communication is difficult. But yeah, when you work remotely, then communication becomes very important. So something crucial. So when you start, when you recruit someone who's working remotely, make sure that from the first day on, the person is being onboarded. And onboarding is not like something that you do one day and then it's done, but it's something that goes on. Because then at some point you have also to offer some kind of formations, some courses to your employees. It's also some in some sort a kind of onboarding. So I would say onboarding them to the goal of the company, not onboarding to their tasks. So maybe that shift in mindset changes also the way people appreciate their tasks, because they also feel responsible for the success of the company. And I think everybody's proud when they feel like, hey, I contributed to the success of this company. I mean, if we take the example of Platform.sh, for example, you've been growing, and if you guys know that you contributed somehow, even if it's just 10%, so you just feel like very proud. Also, it's also motivating. And once, of course, feedback is also something that we should not underrate, because with feedbacks you will also grow as a company. So you will understand what not only your clients need, but most importantly your employees. Because at the end, in terms of marketing, I always say the way we do marketing should come from the inside of the company. Many companies make the mistake where they just make advertising outside. Everybody can see the company as fancy, like as something wow, and everyone wants to work for the company. But when they come into the company, they realize, okay, what the hell am I here? Can I please leave again? So, but we should have our employees being happy to work with us. So also creating that bond between the employees is something that is very valuable, because people stay in the company because first of all because of their managers, but people also leave because of managers. So they don't leave because the company is boring, but they also stay because of their colleagues. And so they're happy to have people that they appreciate, so that somehow become also friends for life maybe. So in remote working, as I said, I can only keep highlighting it. What do you allow your employees to communicate, thanks to tools that allow them to communicate, and employees also should also be ready to help their employees and or their colleagues know very well that everybody needs help sometime. So if you know that you can call somebody during working times, then you get a reply immediately, or you can write a message on Slack. Then of course it's something that you value. You know that you will never fall. So someone will always be there to catch you. And but it's also a question of the way you communicate something. If I go to Slack and write Christian, I need to talk to you, or Christian, let's have a talk, something. Okay, we talk. Of course, he will say, is it something important? What does he want from me? And especially if it does your manager, then you may be afraid to say, what did I do something wrong? But it's also a way of communicating. I think from the human side, it's the challenge we also have is that we have to learn how to communicate, not just having the tools, but also to know when you chat, then you should write in a way that it's not that it cannot be interpreted maybe wrongly. So we have also to be careful, and it's also a way of trusting people. So when you trust someone, then you know that person will come towards you. You can count on that person. But I especially here want to really highlight the value of trust that comes from a manager towards his or her employees, because at the end, people who feel appreciated, that's one thing, but being trusted is also something that you can't really describe when it comes to its value. So and especially with remote work, many people have the problem that they don't allow it because they don't trust their employees. So just saying, well, I'm not sure if that person is working, if they're at home or something, but maybe they're working much more than at the office. Something I don't know why they don't think about that. For them, it's just like when at the office, when a manager sees you really physically, then they feel, okay, that person must be working. But maybe I'm surfing around the internet. I don't know, maybe I'm on Facebook, but he doesn't see it. He just thinking, well, Yahya is here at the office, so he's working. But really, I can only highlight it. So challenge, the biggest challenge for me, really, in my opinion, when there is really trust. So trust decides on whether we accept remote work or don't.
Thanks. It's true that if you trust people first, then they want you be proud of them. So they will try to, be up to the task and perform better. And also they will phrase, things whenever they run into blockers, where if they're afraid of you, it's a different mindset, it's a different relationship, and maybe you don't have a relationship. So it's important to put that trust forward and lead by exemplarity, as a leader, by being fully transparent. This way, the communication flows and everything can be sorted out pretty initially. I don't know if you want to add something, Christian, regarding all that Yahya said.
No, I think it's very much important to onboard someone properly first, especially when you're remote. So I once joined a company and the interview was fully remote. I was living in another country than the company was located in. So I was hired fully remote. And then on my first work day, I found a checklist of some things to do, to get access to some tools. So I went through that. Then there was a 1.5-hour call with one of the engineers. And after that, he basically told me, well, since everybody's off at a conference, just go into, I was working in support, just go and pick up some tickets and start responding to them. And I freaked out a little bit because I was anxious, never having been hired fully remote. And then the guy just tells me, yeah, go on and start some work. So that was maybe not the best experience. I think if you onboard someone properly from day one, you set up the path to success, right? You make sure that the person becomes a good and valuable member of your team. That's kind of, setting things right. I did manage to figure it out eventually, and I did work well at this company, but it was a bit terrifying, to be honest. So if you have a proper onboarding, a proper process in place, that is a lot of help as well. And I agreed to the fact that trust should be given from day one, because you can't be behind someone that's physically located in another country all day and see if they're actually working. No, you actually have to trust them. But if you give that trust out, usually most people reciprocate and give it back to you as well. I've worked in many remote companies now, in 3 or 4, and we've almost never had an issue with someone underperforming, as in someone not doing their job well. We have to get rid of, or had to fire maybe some people for different reasons, but actually not many because they were not performing. So I think if you can trust people from day one, they will give back efficiency and productivity to you. It's because you feel valued much more if you're being trusted, right?
You're right. I could also compare, how companies are using, for example, what we call the buddy system, which is either an hour every week for new joiners for a month and a half, or half an hour every day for a month. Either way, it's usually, people start asking questions about PDO, how to do some training, how to onboard others, what's expected of them, or can they contribute better? And after a while, they get comfortable with way more people because they're being presented, thanks to that buddy, to new people, managers, guys who've been there from the start, and it creates a healthier culture. So I totally agree. Now let's talk about the opportunities from the human side. Yeah.
As we mentioned earlier, so happy employees are usually those who perform well also. So I really would also to remind everybody that remote work shouldn't just be considered as a benefit to them. So just saying, hey, we got the big benefit for you. It's like working remotely. Working remotely is a work culture. So it's like saying to someone who comes to the office, hey, we got a nice office, so that's your benefit. So for me, it was like, yeah, okay, working remotely. Thank you for trusting me. Maybe we should call it trust, but trust is also something we expect. So when we offer remote working to someone, then we should tell them also, it's not just that you're free to work wherever you want to, but also encouraging it. So telling people, so making them understand that everybody is behind them. So everybody likes that idea. So it's really a work culture. It's not something that we can consider as a benefit. I've seen many recruiters who publish an offer or who reach out to me on LinkedIn. They say, hey, we got those nice packages, and this is the salary, this is what you get, and you have also remote work. Then I look at them and like, yeah, sorry, but it's your work. I hope it's your work culture. It's not something that you're offering to me to get me leaving the company I'm working for. And of course, as I said, it's also about supporting your employees. So when they work remotely and communicate and support become even more fun. But it's also, of course, also a big opportunity, because then you really learn to stick to your employees, to understand what their needs may be, And maybe you also start learning, asking how are you, and then just what have you done so far today. That's something really where I really become quite disappointed. I mean, but you just imagine you've been working maybe over 8 or 10 hours a day, and so you were doing like a lot of things, just hoping to do something that brings success to the company. And then the first question you get from a manager is, so what have you been doing so far? And for me, it's like, well, okay, thank you for asking me, but maybe I've been sick. I don't know. I've been working like over 10 hours, and everybody says we have to be careful when it comes to burnout, for example. So if you never ask your employee how they are doing, then you will never know it. And you would still have managers who say, well, but you never told me how you do. Yeah, because you have never asked me to. So why should I say that? And at the end, when you ask somebody, or when you just ask very simple questions, how are you doing, or how's been your day, something, then you will also learn from the background. So maybe you will learn how educated they are. I've made the experience of some companies that I mentor. I've seen that when an employee leaves, then they realize how that guy actually had like PhD. I never noticed it. That's like something very, very disappointing also. But remote work gives you this opportunity, because then you really highlight the fact that you have to communicate well, you have to be transparent, and then try to find out more about the employees, because you won't be able to meet them. Christian said that he has never met his colleagues, but I still experience that he's like a very good team, like with Katie. So they're doing something something well together. So that's also something that teaches you remote work. It's also crucial to put that old thinking of having those hierarchies. Everybody now, most of say let's most job posting they write down, we have like flat hierarchies. I mean, what is flat? Is there a hierarchy or not? So we should really put aside all those thinking, because when you say it is flat, but it doesn't mean that hierarchies don't exist. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't exist, but they shouldn't be like obvious. So I shouldn't have the feeling when I speak with someone, that person is not my colleague, but it's my manager. So at the end, if companies are able to have that kind of culture where everybody can speak to their managers, to the big directors, to the CEOs, the board members, like someone who's like part of the company, then of course the things become way easier. And then you feel like being in a family, not just working in a company.
Thank you. Yeah. Maybe Christian, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I've been part of almost 2 families now. One of the older jobs as well, we even went so far as to having a monthly call where we talked about the financials of the company. We knew exactly what was in our bank account at that given amount of at that time, and this installed a huge trust in us. I mean, we trust the company, the leadership 100%. And they also lived that sort of everybody can give feedback. So for the longest time, even when we reached 100 people or so, sometimes when we talked about new initiatives, everybody in the company could give feedback, no matter if they were from marketing, engineering, operations, HR, or any other department. We were all able to give feedback on new things that we worked on. That all made us kind of believe that we were part of something bigger, right? So yeah, the human aspect is really important. You want your employees to feel free. And basically the role of a manager is not to manage a resource like a person, for example, but I see it more as being a leader, where you show basically the company, okay, that's where we want to go in the next 6 months or maybe the next 2 years. That's our goal. Now figure out how we can get there, and rally the people behind you, and basically whenever they encounter blockers, just remove them. So you should be able to communicate your vision well. You should be able to rally the people behind towards a common goal. And also you should be able to remove blockers if there are any. And you'll be one of the best managers, because usually the people actually doing the work, they know how to do it best, most of the time, at least in my experience. So maybe you should not, kind of be like in the army, where you have to feel like you have to give an order about every single detail of work, but maybe let just people figure it out and just tell them, okay, that's where we want to go now. How can we get there?
Okay, thank you. I guess now it's time for the key takeaways, right? Let's go over them quickly. So first, we discovered that, of course, remote work, we already knew it, right? But it's here to stay if you look at what people want. There's no way it's going away. So either you will adapt or you might perish because they will flock then to another company. I mean, at least the talented workers. Second, remote, of course, doesn't mean cheap freelance labor. It's a shift where your company lives. So if you pay them fairly, you will get great talent from anywhere, and if you give them cool benefits and training and a nice intellectual challenging environment, then they will stay. Also, my third point is without the stress of commuting several hours, every day, your employees will be happier, more productive, they will have time to see their families, grow themselves on personal and professional level, be with their loved ones or stay fit, and you will benefit from it. So it's a win-win for everyone. The last one is if you're worried about productivity because this is something new for you, it's okay, you're surprised, but many surveys and data points go towards most people being more productive remotely than in the office. At first, the one who can figure out the schedule because they were not used to it will actually work a little bit more. And you will have, as a manager, to encourage them to have a healthier work-life balance. So this will be on your side, but you won't be having problems regarding productivity. So thank you everyone for being there. Now, I guess it's the time for you to ask us questions. Let's start with the chat, of course. We're not that many left, I guess. Okay, so we do have a first one. So the first question is, in a big and global team, do you ever struggle with cultural differences? And if yes, how do you deal with that? I'll let you both answer.
Well, speaking from my experience at Platform.sh, actually, I don't think we struggle because of culture differences. We struggle sometimes because maybe we work in different time zones. So you only have a certain amount of hours where the teams converge. So my team is located in the EU as well as in the United States. So we only have about 3 or 4 hours where we can get a call in. There are sometimes, funny things we discover talking about our lives, being from different cultures, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily a struggle. And I think that the key behind that is, having hired the right people. Like nobody wants to work with an a-hole, for example. So it's really, that's something that you need to take, that you need to put high on the priority list. Like don't hire people that are not a good team fit for your team. And if you can get that right, if you can get the right people, I don't think it's a struggle. It's maybe more of an enrichment of sorts. That makes sense.
Agreed. Me on my end, what I hear people, it's true that I pay attention to their general openness regarding cultural differences. So either from a mixed background, or they have an interest in another language, or they do a sport or something that forces them to engage with people from not just their community, but another one, of course. And usually you can track that down very easily just by talking with them. On my end, for the time difference, it's true that when you have the US time zone, the EMEA, the APAC one, what's good is to not necessarily have a guideline, but there's that first trick where you actually put your hours in your calendar so people cannot book a meeting for you at 4 a.m. I mean, we've all been there, right? At some point, learning. And so on the other side of the spectrum, as you were saying, Christian, it's nice to live a few half hours here and there just for teammates and say, hey guys, for example, in Slack, every day from that hour, if you want, we can book it because this is some extra time I'm taking or on my break, just so together, we have that time, and then I'll have my break later. It's fine, Maybe Yahya, you have something to say about it?
Well, I have. I've made a very interesting experience when it comes to time zones. It was with Christian, by the way. the time we used to work, at first I found it very cool to have someone who's working remotely, and I was working in the office here in Switzerland. And I was also totally okay with it that he was based on an island, sitting by the beach or something. And the time zone was also fine because he was based in Fuerteventura, if I remember well. And then at some point he said he's going to Colombia, and I was like, how should we do it? And for him it was like very normal. Yeah, don't worry, I will try to at least wake up early, and then we can make it. So it's just a question of commitment of each employees. So Christian makes sure that he was in line with my time, and I was also making sure that I was in line with my time. So meetings don't always have to be at 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning. So they can also be 3. Maybe for Christian it was 8, but for me it was fine. So at least he was awake and he was ready to work. So it's for me, it's as I said, it also depends on the understanding of culture. So as you mentioned, Pierre, when you have a certain degree of cultural understanding, then you're aware of it, that someone who's based on the other edge of the planet, maybe that person has another time zone, but it's totally fine because you accept the cultural differences, but also the time zone.
If your company's in Europe, just don't go to Australia, because there is no good time where you can take a call. It's either 5 in the morning or midnight of your day.
Agreed. Been there too. We have time for one more question if someone has one. Let's see. Oh yeah, because it's almost time. Well, I guess if we're good, for everyone, thank you for attending. It was a pleasure. Of course, we'll send you the deck. You will have access to the recording, and please feel free to connect with us either on LinkedIn or on other social media. We would like to continue this conversation. Can't wait to see you at another webinar. It's been great. So you all have a good day, and let's speak soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.